Hey there, fellow netizens. This is Kevin in the editor's chair. Happy belated holidays. If you celebrate whatever you celebrate, I hope it was happy and fun and not too stressful. Happy 2025. We're excited for the new year. And after coming off a long series on college sports video games, we decided to take December off for the holidays. And so instead of putting out a new episode for this month, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I know that a lot of shows will often take the holidays to go into their back catalog and re-air old episodes, and I'm doing something like that this month, but with a little bit of a twist on it. So the two episodes this month are going to be, in some ways, a re-airing of a previous episode we did, but more accurately, a remastering of them. Because I feel like in the nearly 3 years that I've done this show, I'd like to think that I've grown and I've changed as not just as a researcher and a writer, but also as a content creator. And one thing that has changed is really my priorities when it comes to editing. Now, early on in the show, I really tried to emphasize when we did one episode a month, and I really tried to prioritize putting out episodes that were not too terribly long. And as a result of that, in a kind of desperate, furious attempt to cut down on the runtime, I cut out a lot. And it left a lot of really interesting and fun conversations on the cutting room floor that I would not have left out in more recent episodes. So looking back, I wanted to go to an episode that we had done in the past, and I decided to go back and do a remastered version of probably my favorite episode that we've done. We've done a lot of fun ones together. Our one on Postal 2 from a few years ago. Andy, Elford, Phil, and I had a really fun conversation about this fascinating game, which I feel like has become a little bit more relevant given recent political events and maybe current administrations coming in. So I decided to go back to our Postal 2 episode and approach it with a more modern sensibilities in terms of me as an editor, modern perspective, and try to leave in some more things. And it was just a lot of fun going back to this episode and hearing these conversations. And I hope that you all enjoy it. So the next two episodes, we'll do the first half of our remastered Postal 2 episode today, and then we'll do the second half in 2 weeks. So I hope you'll stick around for that. And I'm also going to interject with some additional information, recollections, suppositions, and even new things, because there have been some new details about Running with Scissors and about the Postal series since we dropped this episode. So I'll jump in occasionally with some additions there too. And without further ado, here is the first half of our remastered edition of Postal 2.
You're just lucky I can't pee through Zoom.
Hello, fellow netizens, and welcome to Scandalous Games, the show where we take a closer look at video game-related controversies. I'm Kevin Impellizeri, and I do the research and share the story of a video game-related controversy to my friends.
I'm Elford Stephens. I'm a gameaholic.
I'm Phil Thomas, and I'm a relative video game newbie.
And I'm Andy Hunter. Been playing games for a while, but mostly just a Nintendo guy.
Today, we're having our first sequel of sorts on this show. It's a Scandalous Games First, because we are going back to a series we've approached before. We are going back to the Postal series and looking at Postal's 2003 sequel, the PC game Postal 2. So is anybody familiar with Postal 2?
I'm not familiar, but I bet I can guess what it's about.
Did they really double down on the postal service aspect of it now? Is it now much more of just a mail delivery sim?
That would be nice.
Oh, Lord, what a world it would be if that's the angle they took.
We remember the conversation about Postal 1, and that game was kind of a shoot 'em up. It will be interesting to learn what they've done to improve the game.
Well, Postal 2 is a 2003 open-world first-person shooter for the PC and Mac, developed by our old friends Running with Scissors and published by Whiptail Interactive. As you can guess from the title, sequel to the original Postal, and as in the first game, you play as a dude who's very creatively called the Postal Dude as he makes his way through the town of Paradise, Arizona, with levels divided into days, Monday through Friday in the base game, and eventually Saturday and Sunday through a later expansion. The Postal Dude needs to complete a list of chores, such as buying milk, returning a library book, or cashing a paycheck. Along the way, the Postal Dude interacts with the locals of Paradise, including anti-video game protesters, trigger-happy police, and even Al-Qaeda, who place obstacles in his way, all the while hurling insults, derisive laughter, or gunfire at the dude. Facing increasingly challenging hurdles just to make it through each day, it's up to the player to decide how much the Postal Dude is willing to put up with. Will he grin and bear it, or will he give in to his rage and just go postal? If you decide to get violent, the Postal Dude has an array of weapons, including shovels, assault rifles, and napalm, to assist in his murderous rampage. The game also offers clever innovations, like a dedicated button for pissing on people and shoving your gun up a cat's ass to use as a silencer. Have I lost anyone yet?
I haven't heard anything like this.
I was drifting a little bit, but now I'm really hooked, because it's easy to mock it, but I never have heard of using a cat's butt as a silencer before in a video game. So I don't think it's a stretch to call that an innovation of a sort.
I mean, that is a stretch.
Hi-yo.
Dear God.
I'm just saying.
I'm already embarrassed with us.
Oh, but here's the thing. I think I would definitely dock points from this game, though, if while using the cat's butt as a silencer, the dude doesn't give a line like, hey, I thought I told you not to litter. Something, cat butt related.
I'd like a disclaimer that says no cats were harmed during the production of this game.
I usually do a back of the box description here, like when we focus on specifically a game, but Postal 2's box is not terribly exciting, as opposed to any kind of flavor text, like even the first Postal had. It's just a bulleted list of features. For example, it boasted Postal 2 had, quote, humor with absurd, over-the-top violent content, and quote, a psychological thriller with a punchline ending, end quote. Other listed features included a non-linear open world, NPCs you can interact with, thank God, because no game has ever had that before, and the ability to play as the Postal Dude, which, up to that point, only one game let you do that, so I guess that's pretty special. All kidding aside, while Postal 2 marketed itself as a violent video game, it also promised an experience where the player could decide exactly how violent they wanted their experience to be. Quote, Postal 2 is only as violent as you are. You can be a pacifist or an ultra-violent dude, end quote. However, the game box did caution, quote, if you choose to play as a pacifist, you'll still have to deal with the NPCs, who may also go postal, end quote. So today, we're going to examine Postal 2, its development, its reception, as well as the fortunes of its creators running with scissors. And I'll present my case for why I think this might actually be the earliest MAGA video game. If you'd like a detailed rundown, listeners, of the early years of Running with Scissors and their first game, go ahead and check out our episode on the original Postal. But here's the short version. Running with Scissors was founded in 1996 as an offshoot of RSP Inc., which was a work-for-hire game development company run by Mike Riddell and Vincent J. Desiderio Jr., aka Vince Desi. During the 1980s and into the early 90s, RSP had primarily worked on licensed games with a heavy emphasis on children's programming. They created Running with Scissors as a vehicle for original IP that would break out of their family-friendly mold. The first original title for Running with Scissors was Postal, which was an isometric shooter released for the PC in 1997, where your goal was to go on a mass shooting spree through the town of Paradise, Arizona. On the back of an aggressive, controversy-based marketing campaign, the game attracted denunciations from the likes of the United States Postal Service and U.S. Senator Joseph Lieberman. It ended up getting dropped by major retailers, as well as its publisher Ripcord Games, on its way to mixed reviews and very, very modest sales. However, were you to ask Running with Scissors head Vince Desi, he would paint a significantly rosier picture of Postal's fortunes. To hear him tell it, the game had been an overwhelming success, selling hundreds of thousands of copies, and the self-described envelope-shredding letter bomb of a game had been a phenomenon so extreme it had been, in his words, blacklisted in the United States. As for losing its publisher, well, that wasn't lackluster sales, no siree. That was because Howard Stern read the wrong ad copy on his show and scared off Ripcord's parent company, Panasonic, away from being associated with the most extreme game ever made. And again, for more on all of that, check out our Postal episode.
I mean, do you think he actually did sell hundreds of thousands of copies, or is he clearly lying?
Do I think he sold hundreds of thousands of copies?
Yeah, your personal opinion.
No, I absolutely do not think he sold hundreds of thousands of copies.
Okay.
Hey there, fellow netizens. Kevin back here in the editor's chair. A little bit of clarification here. Just going back to that question of exactly how many copies Postal 1 sold. And I'm just going to clarify here that I have not really seen great sales figures. There's a couple of numbers that I've seen jumped around the internet in a couple different sources. So, for example, many accounts when Postal initially came out said that it was extremely modest in terms of its sales. For example, a December the 8th, 1997 report in Computer Retail Week said that Postal had sold 9,800 units since its release in late September, saying, quote, Postal sold more than 6,650 units in October and has sold more than 9,800 units since the September release, according to audited sales data from market research firm PC Data of Reston, Virginia, end quote. A November the 4th, 1997 article in the Philadelphia Inquirer reported Postal had ranked 15th in new release sales and quoted a manager of the King of Prussia Mall Electronics Boutique who said of Postal, quote, it's okay, but it's not hot, end quote, adding sales from other games, quote, blow away Postal, end quote. Its Wikipedia entry, now I know Wikipedia, don't get me started on that. But anyway, the Wikipedia entry cites a PC Gamer article, which cites the MPD Group, which is a market research firm that tracks game sales, that said that by the end of 2002, Postal had sold 49,036 copies in the 5 years since its September 1997 release. So that doesn't sound very good. However, if you were to ask representatives from Running with Scissors, they would say something significantly different during this time. So again, you heard those low numbers I had. Well, in a March the 23rd, 1998 article in Consumer Media Reports, Running with Scissors representatives claimed that Postal had sold over 100,000 copies, which is very different from those other numbers we just said. And by July of 1998, Vince Desi was claiming that number was now double that, with about 200,000 copies. And that comes from an article that I found in Investors Business Daily from July the 9th, 1998. So all of that is to say that I'm a bit dubious when Running with Scissors representatives say about the overwhelming success of Postal. And that's not even including the fact that it had been pulled from a lot of major retailers within the first couple of weeks of its release. Anyway, I hope that clarifies a bit how I'm a little bit skeptical when I hear figures directly coming from Running with Scissors. And back to the show.
Is it possible that each disc sold had like 6 copies of the game on it, though?
I had not considered that, Andy. That's possible. Buy 1 copy of Postal, and we'll throw in 6 free copies, selling dozens and dozens at a time.
That's pretty funny.
They're giving them out like America Online floppy disks. All right, let's start our tale then in early 1998. In early 1998, Running with Scissors released Special Delivery, a Postal expansion that added 4 new levels and a co-op feature. And then for a while, nothing happened. Running with Scissors apparently willing to just let that money roll in from a game that had been dropped by most major American retailers. Fast forward to the end of 2001, and a controversial game with over-the-top humor and violence was taking the gaming world by storm. Oh, no. It wasn't a Running with Scissors game. It was Grand Theft Auto 3. Developed by DMA Design and published by Rockstar Games, Grand Theft Auto 3 for the PlayStation 2 transformed the traditionally top-down series into a sprawling 3D city, where players took on the role of a low-level thug working his way through the criminal underworld of Liberty City. It was a huge leap forward both in the series and gaming, attracting mainstream attention on its way to becoming a commercial and critical success. Grand Theft Auto 3 sold nearly 2 million copies in 2001 alone, and at one point it was the second best-selling piece of software in the United States, behind only Norton Antivirus 2002.
Wow.
This was a massive game. I know for me, this was a formative period in my gaming existence because there had been nothing like Grand Theft Auto 3. To say Grand Theft Auto 3 was influential in video game design in the early 21st century is a massive understatement, and many developers adopted different elements from it. These included the rise of the open world sandbox genre, games that tackled more complex stories or pushed the boundaries of violence, profanity, and sex, and some games that just straight up tried to attract controversy for easy public attention and quick sales. I'm looking at you, Acclaim, with BMX XXX, which will be a future episode. Regardless of how they approached it, in the years to come, numerous other game companies tried to jump on the GTA bandwagon, borrowing elements popularized by Grand Theft Auto 3 in hopes of replicating its success. And one of those companies paying close attention to Grand Theft Auto 3 was Running with Scissors, who were inexplicably still in business despite not releasing anything since Special Delivery in 1998. How the small independent firm managed to remain in operation despite not making anything in 4 years or releasing releasing anything in 3 years is a mystery to me, and whether Vince Desi had a deceased wealthy relative who left him a huge inheritance, or he had held a foreign royal for ransom, or slipped in a Manhattan bagel and collected a huge settlement, we'll never know. Nevertheless, Running with Scissors saw GTA 3 as justification to finally get back into the game-making business. On February the 5th, 2002, Running with Scissors officially announced a Postal sequel with a press release titled Postal 2 Unfriggin' Real. In it, the company declared, quote, "Today, the most dangerous video game development company on the planet, Running with Scissors, announced Postal 2 is coming for real." Reals on all caps. Vince Desi promised the new game would cause more trouble for the establishment than its predecessor, exclaiming, quote, "The spineless bastards who pretend to represent the interests of the non-game-plagued public are going to shit themselves when they see this," end quote. Now, design-wise, Grand Theft Auto 3's inspiration for Postal 2 is pretty obvious. For one, like Grand Theft Auto, Postal 2 replaced the original's top-down isometric perspective with an open world, turning Paradise, Arizona into an explorable 3D world where the Postal 2 could interact with the various colorful characters that lived in Paradise, and possibly decapitate them with a shovel. Postal 2 also ramped up the violence, replacing the bog standard shooting of the original Postal with a more cartoonish, over-the-top approach. The game gave players the freedom to just lay waste to everyone they meet, beat them to death with protest signs, throw diseased cow heads at them, douse them in gasoline and light them on fire, and piss on people until they vomited thanks to a dedicated peeing button, or shove a gun up a cat's ass as a silencer and helmet full of lead. On the other hand, like I mentioned at the outset, Running with Scissors added an interesting twist. The game left it up to the player to decide when and if they wanted to start shooting, and its missions put players in a position where they could choose whether to complete an objective peacefully or violently. For example, stand in line at the bank and wait to cash that check, or mow down everyone in front of you, grab the money from the vault, and run for the cops. The choice, Running with Scissors claimed, was up to the player. So that theoretically, a player could make it through the entire game without killing anyone, although I'll talk about more about how well they executed that in a little bit. As their slogan explained, quote, "It's only as violent as you are." Thoughts so far?
Well, it sounds interesting, right? So how are they going to make this game fun? And there's going to be a choice in how I go about this. It sounds interesting.
I have a question. So there's a dedicated P button for the attacker, and you can use a cat as a silencer. Is the cat then allowed to pee on you? Because I think that's only fair.
You'd think so.
Speaking for cats' rights advocates.
Sorry, Whiskers. The day is not going to end well for you if the Postal Dude makes that choice.
Yeah. What's got into that cat? Postal Dude's gun.
Oh, dear God.
God. Like, for the record, can we all just say we're abhorred by the idea of using a cat as a silencer? Can we just state that?
Yeah, although it is, I mean, it's a comical image in the sense that I think like a number of years ago, there was like a viral video of just like laser cats or something, which, you know, it's just people holding cats, but then, then, you know, with After Effects, they add like lasers coming out of the cat's eyes or something. And so it's like treating a cat as though it itself is a gun. But yeah, I do not recommend putting anything up your cat's butt unless prescribed by their veterinarian.
Andy, do you remember the Battle Cats Saturday Night Live skits from like the early 90s? There were these like G.I. Joe or Transformers style commercials where you could like equip your cats with like weapons. Like you could put all these like laser stations and like, you know, like G.I. Joe style command centers on your cats. And the cats clearly hated them, but they looked menacing.
No, the greatest cat-based weapon in gaming, I think, is I want to say this is for Unreal, but I could totally be wrong. It might be Unreal or Bulletstorm. I remember seeing years ago, someone did a mod for this game. It's one of like those, like an Unreal tournament where it's just like, you know, battle royale kind of fighting. And someone added a mod where it was a rocket launcher that shot the Nyan Cat. And so it was a seeker missile that would track people. And while it fired, it played the Nyan Cat sound, and trailing behind it was the rainbow. Hey there, fellow netizens. This is Kevin in the editor's chair, jumping in with a clarification here on what game had this Nyan Cat mod. So this was a mod to the Redeemer weapon from Unreal Tournament 3. This was released in 2011, put together by Azure Scorch, Biohazard, and Crazy for the PC and PS3 versions of Unreal Tournament 3. I will leave a link in the description because it's just very, very funny seeing the Nyan Cat turn into the seeker missile of death. Anyway, back to the show.
Okay, so I at least feel like as a society, we've evolved in our cat viral content.
I just have one thing to say about the supposed mission statement that you as the player could choose whether to be violent or not. I am personally dubious that their design chops were right up there with like the folks who made Deus Ex in terms of like, you can really like pick the path that you want to go down, but I'm ready to be surprised.
Andy, are you insinuating that the folks at Running with Scissors are not at the level of the guys who made Deus Ex?
I've been thinking similar because when you're standing in line at the post office, if you don't whip your gun out, what else are you going to do? I could see you standing, waiting, moving forward, standing, waiting, moving forward. But how else are they going to make the game fun? Because there has to be an objective for it to be a game, really. There has to be some objective. So I'm curious, how did they accomplish this?
That is what we're going to explore. So that's our claim. Their claim this game is only as violent as you are. They also tried to lift some of Grand Theft Auto 3's satirical humor. Because you see, with the Postal sequel, the guys at Running with Scissors clearly decided that one thing that the first Postal game was missing was jokes. And the team set out to make Postal 2 an over-the-top satire that would leave the player holding their sides with clever, incisive humor, poking fun at the foibles of modern American society. As Vince Desi later explained in a 2007 interview with Brendan Sinclair of GameSpot, quote, "Our design policy is really very simple. When we consider content, we first ask ourselves, is this fun to play? And second, is it funny? We never think in terms of violence. It reduces the game to a one-dimensional perspective, aka boring. We design for laughs. It's so much more entertaining when you can play for fun and at the same time laugh your ass off," end quote. Now, I will say it in the outset, I am no comedy expert, and no sane person would accuse me of being intentionally funny. And check out my previous output on the show as an overwhelming body of evidence for that. But I think it's really interesting to see people's comedic inspirations. And playing through Postal 2, and I'll talk more about my experience about that a little later too, you can definitely see some of the elements that influence Running with Scissors' style of humor. For one, they clearly spent a lot of time mainlining the first couple of seasons of South Park and pre-cancellation Family Guy, as they definitely wanted Postal 2 to be the rudest, crudest game ever created, chock full of swearing and bathroom humor, sprinkled with a bunch of absurdist, lol, so random moments. And I mean, a bunch of us were really into that. I mean, I remember when Family Guy was so big in the late 1990s and early 2000s. This is, I also in the timeline, this is before those DVDs came out that everybody literally bought.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Question. So with that type of humor, do you think that was inspired by GTA 3? Or do you think that was inspired by something else that was super popular at that moment?
I mean, it's been ages since I played GTA 3. And I know that like Grand Theft Auto kind of plays a bit with that, but they're never really out and out like crude humor, as I recall. Like I played a lot of San Andreas recently, and it's a lot of suggestive stuff. Like, for example, you can drive an ice cream truck that it's designed on the top. It looks like a cock and balls, but it's like it's subtle. It's innuendo, which I think is more GTA style than this. I mean, there's definitely like the swearing in Grand Theft Auto, and like there's that part. But I feel like some of this other stuff that they're going with is probably more. I wouldn't say it's probably more inspired by South Park than anything else.
Okay, so the sense I'm getting is that right now this is a cash grab for anything that seems to be making money at this window in time in America.
I think that might not be an unfair assessment.
Okay.
Wait till you hear the rest of this stuff. So again, going back to our absurdist, also random stuff and our swearing and bathroom humor. So take the Postal dude's dialogue as an example of this. Practically every other word he says is shit, or you gotta be fucking kidding me. That's a kind of the sense of where the language is. Like I said, you can also hit a button, unzip your fly, and pee on people, watching them throw up. Although some people, they make it so that they're into it and will dance. So there's that. He could also pee on himself to douse himself if he accidentally sets himself on fire. Speaking of the lull random category, one section has you running around in a gimp suit while everyone laughs at you. You can get a quick health boost by smoking crack. And overall, playing through this game, I kind of get in terms of humor where they were going for, but I think in my opinion, a lot of the delivery comes off as forced and lazy. You kind of alluded to this, Phil, kind of like capitalizing on a specific trend in humor. And I think a lot of, like South Park really influenced a lot of that kind of stuff at this particular period in time. Because South Park comes out, 97, I think, 97, 98. And like there were a bunch of shows that were trying to go for like the adult humor like that. But in my opinion, a lot of its delivery comes off as forced and lazy. Less South Park and more tripping the riff. Kids, ask your parents.
Now, we're saying that this seems like it's, really, aping South Park. To me, it just kind of feels true to life. I mean, I go around literally most days, all that I say is, oh shit, or you've got to be fucking kidding me. And I mean, as you go throughout the world, what are your main options for interacting with it other than shooting it or urinating on it?
Wait, oh shit. Those are your responses, Andy? You've got to be fucking kidding me.
The Postal Dude speaks for the human experience when you're going to be fucking kidding me.
You're just lucky I can't pee through Zoom, Phil.
Oh shit. Get out of here. You gotta be fucking kidding me.
That's being a millennial these days, is, you gotta be fucking kidding me. All right, so we heard one set of inspiration for these guys. Another set of inspiration that really shines through is the routines of 90s stand-up comedians and late night hosts, because Postal 2 is packed to the brim with dated humor, even for the early 2000s. For example, the game has a drawn-out set of jokes about the 2000 presidential election, including a hanging Chad reference, Kids Ask Your Parents. It has references to the Clinton impeachment and the Psychic Friends Network. Kids Ask Your Grandparents for that one. And even one whole section that's an extended parody of the 1993 Waco siege. Dude, look it up. I don't have time to explain. It's so egregious. I'm honestly shocked that they didn't include a joke about airline food or the DMV. Maybe it's in the expansions that I didn't play them.
I run out of space on the floppy disk.
They were too busy putting 6 copies of the game on it.
Dude, there's literally a fucking Paula Jones reference in this game that has no business being in there.
Wait, who was Paula Jones again? Was she?
That was like Monica Lewinsky's friend who she shared the stuff about the Clinton affair. Like, everybody loved making Paula Jones jokes in like 1996, which is 7 years before this game came out.
Oh, wait, hold on. I thought that was Linda Tripp.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Paula Jones was the one that Clinton had an affair with in the early 90s, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
That's right. I forgot it's Paula Jones, not Linda Tripp.
When he was governor of Arkansas?
Yeah. So, dude, when did it happen? Like 1990 or 1991 in this 2003 game, they put a Paula Jones reference.
Moral of the story is don't leave Bill Clinton alone in your house.
Fair enough. Some of their jokes also come off as the Kirkland brand equivalent of Grand Theft Auto 3 jokes. For example, like GTA, Postal 2 has off-the-wall signage all over Paradise. However, Live It, in my opinion, comes off just as lazy and lowest common denominator. For example, the local bank is called Fee of America. Get it? There are shipping containers all over the place that should say ball sacks on them, because that's a funny word to say. The local Chinese restaurant is called Cock Asian. Flyers advertise for Father Touchy's after-school boys club, and a headstone in the town graveyard just says rape clowns. I mean, say what you will about South Park, and there's plenty that can be said about South Park, but Matt Stern and Trey Parker usually use their lowbrow humor to say something. And in my opinion, a lot of it in Postal 2 just comes off as it's just for its own sake.
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Oh, and speaking of rape jokes, did I mention the racism, sexism, and homophobia? Because in pursuit of maximum laughs, Running with Scissors also put in a lot of that. Early in the game, you encounter a convenience store clerk who is literally just a straight up ripoff of Apu from The Simpsons, complete with telling customers to come again.
Great.
It also turns out that he's harboring Islamic terrorists because, brown people be dangerous. There is also a sight gag where you see a character in a turban perusing the bomb guides and terrorist handbook section of the Paradise Library. One place in town is just called the Ghetto Licka Brewery because urban slang is really funny when white people write it. The Postal Dude runs errands for his nagging wife, describing the game simply as the bitch, and later expansions depict her as a fat monster. And in one of the more blatant bids for shock-based attention, if you visit the local video arcade, you can play a game called Gay Slur Hunter, where you have to kill as many gay people as possible. And I don't know about you guys, but my sides, they hurt. My sides are splitting here.
Oh, geez. It's funny. Obviously, this says more about the people who created the game than it does about, American society and what's popular.
Yeah, Running with Scissors wants you to know that they're a company with the balls to tell the real jokes the PC police won't let you say. As the February 5th, 2002 press release snarkily explained, Postal 2 was going to be a, quote, politically corrected game about the most boring subject that we could think of, a guy going to buy milk, end quote. So yeah, this is what we're working with here. So that's a little bit about the design here. Let's see who wants to back this game. Because in February of 2003, Running with Scissors secured a publisher in Whiptail Interactive. Founded in 2003 and based in Westchester, Pennsylvania, Postal 2 was Whiptail's first title. However, Whiptail Interactive was definitely a step down from Postal 1 publisher Ripcord Games. In terms of distribution, Whiptail only managed to get Postal 2 on the shelves at GameStop and EB Games, no really other major retailers. The company also lacked Ripcord's Panasonic-based marketing budget, forcing Running with Scissors to rely on some more creative, low-cost methods to promote their new game. For example, Running with Scissors managed to get a celebrity spokesman. In a bid for lull random marketing, they hired former Different Strokes star Gary Coleman.
Nice.
In addition to portraying himself in the game, Coleman also made appearances at promotional events and gaming conventions. When asked why they chose Coleman, Desi later explained in a 2004 Electronic Gaming Business Report, quote, "He's the symbol of everything that has gone wrong with America," end quote. Which I think is, as a side, I think that's a rather shitty thing to say about somebody that you're working directly with.
I'm curious as to what he meant by that.
I wish that the person who wrote this article had pressed him a little bit more on context, because that's literally all he says about it. And I've got to think that some of that is because at that point, Gary Coleman was mostly getting, I think, public attention on sort of postmodern 80s nostalgia. Like, I think I recall around the same time he did a voice on The Simpsons where he was just basically playing himself as a security guard. On the one hand, I imagine Coleman was not terribly expensive in 2002. And I imagine they're trying to bank on it's so random. Gary Coleman from Different Strokes in our game. That's going to get people to sign up for our game where, we can kill gay people in this little arcade game we made. We had to put that in our game. That was a story that needed to be told. Also, the company adopted the old adage of sex sells, introducing a marketing tactic they called the Postal Babes. The Postal Babes were effectively conventionally attractive women in skimpy Postal branded outfits who would appear at Running with Scissors' sponsored events. So congrats, Running with Scissors. You successfully invented the booth babe. Way to go. So, for example, while the company couldn't afford a booth at E3, they could have Gary Coleman walk around the convention flanked by a pair of Postal Babes who threw Postal branded thongs at attendees. Desi claimed he got the idea for the Postal Babes from the fans themselves, who allegedly had been sending pictures of their wives, girlfriends, and otherwise significant others holding Postal merch in various stages of undress to the company. And I can only just say, yikes.
Sounds like something he just made up.
Oh, yeah, I think he's 100% lying. I think he's totally lying.
If I found somebody to be everything that's wrong with America, I wouldn't hire them to promote my company unless I was trying to troll that person individually as well, which is, kind of a bully mentality. Either way, what are these people thinking? That's my question. Like, who thinks like this? Who behaves like this?
So you're saying, Phil, that if you had the chance to ask them why they were doing this, you might say, "What you talking about?" Pause for laughter.
What you talking about, Phil?
I get what you're saying, though, Phil. And I think that on some level, so I've seen other things where they talk about where their press releases and articles about leading up to Postal 2 where they're bringing in Gary Coleman. I honestly think that on some level, that one thing they thought was hilarious was Gary Coleman going out to the shooting range and shooting with them, because that came up in a couple of different articles, was Gary Coleman going out into the shooting range with the guys at Running with Scissors. And I think they just thought it was hilarious, this little dude holding an assault rifle and firing it off. I think you're on point. I think that there's a certain level of taking advantage of Coleman to do this. And I feel like Coleman at this, again, I don't know what his situation was like. I can't imagine it was great. And a lot of my recollections of Coleman at that time were this sort of shock-based, oh, lol, it's the guy from Different Strokes doing a crazy thing. I mean, I think 2 years after this, if I recall, during the California recall election that got Schwarzenegger elected, he announced his candidacy for governor. And I think some of this, oh, look at that, we got Gary Coleman. Isn't that crazy?
So, as a converse, I don't like Ted Nugent's views, and I think what Jenny McCarthy does as a prominent anti-vaxxer is dangerous. I might advocate that what they're doing is something that's wrong in America today, but I would never hire those people to promote my company because I want to give them another platform to promulgate their views. So the only thing I could take away from him saying that Gary Coleman is what's wrong with America today is that he's black. And this person just doesn't like black people. That's the only thing I can take from this.
I could totally see that. I really could.
I don't really know what it is. Obviously there's a joke there that I don't see. If Gary Coleman represents what's wrong with this country, I can see everything else, having Gary Coleman on something does it's Gary Coleman. Like a lot of us know who he is, and he's very small, and he had the cute way he behaved on the show, and so I could see like the shock value of having him around. But the statement, it's very interesting. So maybe like so many things in politics, there's a code here that I don't know, that Gary Coleman represents all that's wrong with this country. And maybe that's something that people who they're speaking towards know that I just don't know.
Yeah, I think you guys both might be onto something. I mean, the closest thing I can come to maybe a legitimate reason is that he's somebody who, in theory, should be rich, but due to circumstances, which I think in Coleman's case were largely not within his control, he is not rich. And thus somehow like ... failure of modern America to live up to its ideals or something. But, not to jump too far ahead, because I'm sure later on, Kevin, you'll eventually tell us how this game sold. But if I'm recalling correctly, in the Postal 1 episode, did one of you guys allege that is this all just like some money laundering scheme of like how could the company like stay in business for so long, only producing basically a single product that never sold well? And so these sorts of tactics also seem to me it's like random enough and like attention grabbing enough that you could like then say to investors like, well, hey, look, here are all the things we tried, but it just didn't work out. Somebody somewhere is profiting.
Again, my joke before, like, I have no clue how they stuck. Not just that they stuck around at this point and not make anything, but how we'll talk a bit how they stuck around now, but there was a good stretch of time, I think, where I'm astonished that they didn't go under and that they didn't dissolve, considering a lot of their moves and a lot of their fact that they just do not make games. They don't make original IP. They've made 2 games and they've re-released one of them 4 times. Their conundrum, if it came out that this dude was like laundering money or like had some kind of shady financial, I would not be surprised. We'll get more into Vince Desi as we go on. I'm not going to say he's an onion with layers, but he's something like that.
He does stink.
Yeah. Yeah, tipping my hand a little bit too much. I do not like Vince Desi very much, and you're going to see why. But let's get back on track here. Riding less of a wave and more of a budget-constrained ripple of hype, Postal 2 released a limited retail release on April the 14th, 2003. And so what do we think the critical and the fan reception is to this game? How do we think it does in terms of its reception? I'm seeing Phil with the 2 thumbs down.
Considering I never heard of Postal before you brought it up, I'm thinking it did poorly.
Yeah, I was about to ask, did it even make enough of a splash that many critics bothered to review it?
It was reviewed a lot. It was covered a lot by critics, I think in part because of the infamy of its predecessor. So it did get a lot of critical reception, and not much of it was good. The overwhelming critical consensus I've seen is it received mostly middling to poor reviews across the board. So yeah, to say reviews were mixed in the so-called, quote, single most controversial and highly anticipated sequel in the history of video games, to quote from a April 10, 2003 Running with Scissors press release, would be an understatement, as critics gave Postal 2 middling to poor reviews across the board. Most pointed out the game's lackluster combat, poorly designed AI, bad hit detection, and intolerably long load times. Even those who felt the game was fun felt it got old quickly. Much like the original Postal, the company's bold-faced attempt to attract controversy was not lost on critics this time around either. For example, Mark Saltzman of the Globe and Mail observed that, aside from sparking controversy, Postal 2 had little going for it, saying, quote, Postal 2 will likely offend many groups for its disturbing content. Policemen and policewomen can be decapitated with a shovel. Some arcade games in town bear the name Gay Slur Hunter. Cats and dogs can be slaughtered on the streets. Middle Eastern men peruse bomb building and terrorism books at the library before opening fire with a machine gun, and the lead character can unzip his pants and urinate on just about anything, including protesters. But then again, it's this controversy and political incorrectness the developers want to be known for. Too bad for them, it's just not a good game, end quote. Eric Wolpaw of GameSpot, who gave Postal 2 a 4.8 out of 10, commented, quote, it's clear that Postal 2's developers attempted to make an outrageous game to get everyone's attention, but these days, even a game like this requires great gameplay to accompany its naked bid for infamy, something the game designers seem to have failed to realize, end quote. As for the game's attempt at humor, critical reception largely hinged on whether the reviewer was okay with bathroom humor and racist stereotypes. For example, George Smith at Game Rankings wrote a review that I feel tells me just as much about him as it does Postal 2, writing, quote, "Make no mistake about it, Postal 2 is the most offensive game to see release. There's something in Postal 2 that will offend just about every group of crybaby stereotypes or minorities, and the fact that I'm not offended by any of its content means I'm either an enigma or a psychopath," end quote. I'll let him decide which one that is. Others, however, called it juvenile and gross for its own sake. For example, Steve Boxer of The Guardian wrote, quote, "Postal 2 clearly thinks it's chock full of black humor, but frankly, it makes such films as Dumb and Dumber look like the works of English playwright Noel Coward at his sharpest. Far too sick for under 18s, but only teenagers could possibly find it clever," end quote. Ivan Sullick, and we'll go back to Ivan Sullick's review in a little bit. Ivan Sullick of IGN gave the game 5.5 out of 10, noting, quote, "Postal is ironically perfectly suited for 12-year-olds caught up in spending their days trying to get shots of Chun-Li kicking just right so her panties show. So, they're exactly the audience that shouldn't be playing this game. How any other gamer who has body hair and has been kicked in the head by a donkey could like this is beyond my comprehension," end quote. The harshest critics took aim at the game's racism, sexism, and homophobia. Tom Price of Gamer gave the game a 0 out of 10, calling Postal 2, quote, "crass, disgusting, and hateful." Robert Coffey of Computer Gaming World also gave the game a 0, calling it, quote, "a relentlessly idiotic, ill-conceived, hateful, humorless romp through an infected colon," end quote. Ending his review, quote, "until someone boxes up syphilis and sells it as retail, Postal 2 is the worst product ever foisted upon consumers," end quote.
What a review.
To me, one of the greatest lines in video game criticism.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, if I were that critic, I would, frame that clipping and keep it on my wall.
Hold on to the thought of memorializing this, because it's going to come back. That's coming back. Reading through the GameFAQs user reviews from the time, fan reception was also pretty mixed. There were just as many 3 and 4 out of 10s as there were 9 out of 10s. Positives among users included the game's offensive humor, its open world design, and its peeing mechanics. Negatives included the game's offensive humor, super intelligent AI that can hit you even behind cover, which it can, and the game's abysmal loading times. Even people who love the game pointed this out. And in preparation for this episode, as I did with the first Postal game, I subjected myself to Postal 2. Phil knows a little bit about this. I've been documenting my experience with him as I've gone.
Yeah, I think that there was a point when I had to do like a wellness check on Kevin.
Dude, this game hurt my soul, man. This was hard. This is a hard one. So, like I said before, the way the game is structured is the game doesn't have levels, it has days. And it plays through Monday through Friday. And each day is divided into a list of tasks. It's usually between 3 and 4 tasks you have to do each day. Bearing that in mind, I made it through Wednesday and then I gave up. So I went through about 3/5 of this game. So I can say that, one, while I didn't finish the game, I feel like I played enough of it to formulate an opinion about it, number one. Number two, based on Steam achievement percentages, that puts me ahead, I think, about 60% of players who've played Postal 2 on Steam.
Hey there, fellow netizens. This is Kevin, just jumping in with a brief addition to this part. Checking over Steam achievement statistics for Postal 2. Now, again, bearing in mind, Steam achievement statistics would have been much, much later for a game that came out in 2003. Based on my own personal experience making it all the way through Wednesday before giving up, the midway point of this game, according to Steam achievement statistics, only 26.8% of players of Postal 2, at least again, specifically Steam players of Postal 2, have made it that far. So again, I stand by my belief that I've played enough of this game to be able to have an opinion of it, especially because, again, based on Steam statistics, I've gotten further than about 73.2% of its player base. Anyway, back to the show.
So I feel like I've played enough of this game, but after that I gave up. And I can't say that this is the worst game I've ever played. I've been playing video games for a very long time, but this is definitely one of the worst games I've played in a while. But I guess the joke's on me. Writing with Scissors got $2 from me in a couple hours of my time, let alone the amount of time I spent on writing this whole fucking script. But so let's go through this game a little bit. If I were to describe this word, aside from all the racism and all the other shit they put in this game, the big thing I would describe about the experience of this game is traipsing. It does have this open world, but it's like, I would argue this might be the first ever walking simulator, because literally every objective has you go from like one far end of this map
to the other far end of this map. And this game is clearly an example of a team's ambitions outweighing their talents and outweighing the technical limitations they had to work with. Because the way they tried to make this big open world is they tried to make it so that the open world is effectively divided into sections. I'm not a developer, but my understanding is that's not uncommon, is each section of the game, and then you coordinate it off with loading. And most games will try to make it so they hide the loading some way, so you don't see the transition between the different sections of the game. They didn't try that. This is what they do instead. The loading sections, to have the capacity to have those parts of the environment, are separated by literal tunnels that warn you that a loading screen is ahead. And you walk through them, and apparently the loading times were abysmally long. They were still fairly long when I played it, but I mean, I'm playing it in 2021, and I thought they were fine. They were about Half-Life 2 equivalent. But the fact that you have to, anywhere you go in the game, you've got to go through like 3 or 4 of these loading screens to get there. And every objective is always like, you're on one far end of the map and you got to go to the other. The level is also not well organized. Of all the things they ripped off of Grand Theft Auto 3, I wish they ripped off the mini map in the corner of the screen, because instead they have a map screen and it just shows a map of paradise, which is not well laid out. So have fun checking that map every 6 goddamn seconds like I did. So it's not well laid out. I'm constantly checking this map. You're traipsing, a lot of traipsing, a lot of navigating. It also doesn't help. The game's missions are so formulaic and so repetitive. So like every mission in this game, especially in those early days, I eventually watched videos of the later parts of this game, but the first 3 days that I played effectively present you with basically the same scenario. Go from one end of the map to your objective, which is usually on the absolute other end of the map. Navigate maybe 3 or 4 of these long loading gaps to get there. Get to your objective and wait in line, literally waiting in a line of NPCs. So like one of your objectives is to cash a paycheck. You have to stand in line at the bank. One of them is to get milk, and you go to that racist convenience store and you stand in line to buy milk. So going in line and do the task. Inevitably, some group comes in and starts shooting, and you make your way out and onto the next task. Maybe you shoot people on the way if you feel like it. And so in that framework, it's less that the game offers player choice and more accuracy. The game presents the player the same 2 choices over and over and over again. When I go to cash my paycheck / buy milk / return library books / confess sins, do I shoot my way through this line or not? Do I open up an assault rifle and shoot people, or do I literally wait in this goddamn line? When the protesters / bank robbers / police / rednecks / terrorists start shooting, do I shoot back or do I run? And either way, take a whole lot of damage. And we'll talk about combat in a second. So that's the same format for every single mission. It's just so formulaic and so dull and repetitive. And while this game claims that, let's talk about that whole is only violent as you want it to be, that pacifist mode this game has, it claims that. Running was just clearly, blatantly wants you to pick the violent option. They want you to shoot your way through this whole game. They want you to beat people with death with shovels. And to that end, like you mentioned Deus Ex, Andy, this game is not a Dishonored. This game is not a Deus Ex, where the developers realize, okay, we're going to have multiple different play styles, and we're going to make all those playstyles fun. It's like Deus Ex. I played a lot of Deus Ex Human Revolution. And like you can play that game entirely on stealth, not fire a shot, and it's really fun and really interesting and really challenging. Or you can shoot your way through it, and that's fun too. This game is not Deus Ex. And it's not Fallout, and it's not Dishonored and all those games where they're trying to make the violent and non-violent playthroughs equally fun. They try to make the non-violent playthrough as frustrating and as inconvenient as possible, with one fun exception. So the game often offers you this choice. Like I said, stand in this line or shoot your way through this line. With one exception, in the beginning of Tuesday, you have to get a petition signed. You literally have to walk around and go up to NPCs and ask them to sign your petition. There is no violent alternative to this. You literally need to walk up to people and ask them to sign your petition and get 7 of them to sign your petition. And about 2 out of every 3 people you'll go up to will curse you out and make fun of you. And will always say the same line over again, up yours, you freaking pinko. And the only violent thing you can do is if you hit the button numerous times to have them to sign a petition, you'll insult them. And if they're a non-police officer, they'll run away. And if they're a police officer, they'll try to arrest you. But you cannot do this violently. You wanted to jump in, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, once again, this says more about the person who created the game than it does about us. Because guess what? The choices you're supposed to make in this game, I make those choices every day of my life. And you know what choice I make? I choose to stand in line and wait to pay for my groceries. I stand around and get people to sign a petition, and then I go home. We all make that choice. It's fine. I'm totally fine with making that choice. It's not a reason I would play a game.
I will say, running with scissors arguments, you're a goddamn sucker for doing that.
So that's a point that I've been waiting for, and maybe this is going to come soon, where there's an idea here that could work in theory with the right team. But this idea of you're doing something that you would do every day, but there's a violent option. Well, why not choose? What you've told me so far, you've shared with all of us, is that you walk around and it'll tell you to go somewhere else, and you're going to take a long time walking there. And then you're going to have to do something like wait in line. And then people are going to show up and start shooting. That's nothing like real life for the average day, right? Maybe they could have one day of the week where that happens. But if this is happening multiple times a day in this game, this is a very abnormal situation. Nevertheless, I'm waiting for what else is going on in this game, because there's a piece I'm missing here.
So I'm glad you brought that up too. What also doesn't help on that, I think all of this is in service of reminding the player that passivism is consistently the shittier option. And you both kind of alluded to this question, Elford and Phil. So even if you resort to violence, I'll talk about the violent option in a second, but like for a moment, I think this was my brain just falling apart playing this game. But for a moment, I kind of thought maybe there's something secretly brilliant about this idea that they're almost trying to say something really fascinating about video game violence in particular. So you could be like you are in real life. You could stand in line and you can wait your turn and do all those things and not resort to anything. But like, it's like, sure, you can stand in line and buy milk like a chump, like you would in real life. Or you just say, fuck it, and mow everyone down, decapitate them with shovels, pour gasoline on them, light them on fire, piss on the ashes, all that stuff. And the game basically says, this is the way I interpreted it for a moment, the gameplay says that's okay because video game violence is not the same as real world violence and never will be, because the people in Paradise aren't real people. They're polygons and lines of code. And so like, despite what the movie Free Guy would have us believe, that the NPCs don't have feelings or hopes or dreams or families. So why are you even bothering to be peaceful? Like grab a shovel or gas can and some matches and just have fun. Or did you forget that video games are supposed to be fun? And it's almost like Postal 2 conveys by design that passive in video games is for losers. And against all odds, I feel that might be kind of clever. Now, that all having been said, the guys at Running with Scissors have consistently and almost aggressively, we'll talk more about this later, have said basically that video games are purely entertainment, should not be subject to deeper criticism. Games are just consumer goods and they're supposed to be fun, fun and funny, like Vince Desi said. So whether they're intentionally trying to convey that kind of message in the game, I found that kind of interesting.
Well, what I think is strange is that if you're the type of person who's going to mow everybody down at the grocery store because you have to wait in line to buy milk, what the fuck are you buying milk for? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to go home and make yourself a latte with it? You're gonna go home and make some French toast? You don't seem like the type of person who's going to do anything that normal people use milk for in real life. Maybe you should consider getting your groceries delivered.
I'll tell you what Postal Dude is using milk for, Phil. He puts a bowl on the ground, pours some milk in the bowl. A cat comes over, starts drinking the milk, and we know what he needs that cat for. I feel like you haven't been paying attention, Phil.
Oh, you need that? Yeah, where are you going to get the silencer? Oh, I can't believe I was so short-sighted.
So, Kevin, at some point in the game, do you have to go pick up new cats, to replace the cats?
Oh, they're all over the place. You can get catnip, though, and lure them so you can get your, continue your cat silencers.
Oh, so you actually have to catch the cat to use the cat.
You have to acquire these cats, yes.
At least they thought that through.
They're making you work for this.
So I guess what I'm looking for, I'm waiting for you to tell me is, outside of going to the store to get the milk, do they give the player a purpose in this game? Is there a story, or is the only purpose to get the milk? Is that it?
So the extent that this game has a story is, in the first game, he's like, the guy just goes unhinged. The implications that the Postal Dude has been evicted from his house and he decides to snap. In this one, they reframe the Postal Dude from that. So it's just like a violent mass shooter who's just going out and doing this for the violence. Now he's supposed to be like a browbeaten husband who has this horrible wife at home in his trailer he lives in, who is demanding that he goes out and does things. So like, go out and get your paycheck and go cash it at the bank. Use that money to go buy milk, go get me ice cream and things like that. And so it's framed as he's got a shitty life and a shitty marriage, and all these other things are happening around him. And to the extent this game has a story, that's it. And the rest of the through line is just, okay, this awful woman is making me do all of these things. Just as an aside, he's just the Postal dude is just the worst. He's just the whiniest. He complains the whole game. So like, for example, like you get the milk or any of these objectives, he'll say something like, he'll check it off as like, I hope the bitch is happy for that. And like, I'm really, relating to this guy. And like, he speaks for the common man and all that stuff. He sucks. I hate the Postal dude.
So does the player's choices affect the storyline of the Postal dude?
Not a goddamn thing affects this game. It plays out the exact. This game is not a BioShock. They're not playing with what happens if you're passive, as the exact same game plays out either way.
So Postal Dude can't acquire like a different level of being wanted by the police the way you could in a GTA game.
He could. In like Grand Theft Auto, you can just like go on a rampage and not do anything. Like not do anything in service of the plot, just play around and shoot people. And you can get arrested. Apparently, if you get arrested, you have to play out this minigame where you escape from prison over and over again. You have to do this thing where you light something on fire and it triggers the sprinklers, and so they open the gate and you come out. You have to do that every time you're arrested. I didn't even try. I actually was like a chump and I tried to play most of this pacifist until I got to Wednesday, when in Wednesday they basically take all that stuff they said about it only being as violent you are and just throw it out the window, because they start forcing you into narrow corridors where your choices are either, they get a new set of choices. Your choices are either try to shoot your way through or get shot at a whole bunch. And that's the new choice you get.
Yeah, Wednesday is usually about when I give up on my no killing policy during the week.
That's why they call it hump day. Am I right? Am I right? One last piece of commentary before we move on. I'm just tickled by the idea that Vince Desi is reading these press clippings about Postal 2, and then all of a sudden he gets a phone call from his wife where she asks him to pick up some milk, and then he just very demurely goes to the store and buys it and walks in with his like head hanging down and puts it on the counter, because that's who he is in real life. And if he wanted outcomes to be different, he has to create a whole fantasy world that is not very entertaining for anyone else to play, for him to act out, telling his wife, you know what, I don't feel like picking up milk today.
Dude, if you told me that Vince Desi was going through a nasty divorce in this game, I would not be stunned. The way this plays out, like they're dealing with some stuff and some things, and they're putting it on the screen for everybody to play out. But going back to my point before, I said that they basically make this choice between violence and non-violence, and every obstacle is thrown in the player's way if they want to do the passive option. I would be okay with that, were it not for the fact that the combat is absolute dog shit. It's terrible combat. So every enemy is a bullet sponge. The hit detection stinks. So like in this game, if you did a body blow versus a headshot, there's no difference. Like I thought this is what we figured out in GoldenEye, which came out in 1997. Like headshots are not different than any other place. It doesn't help that the enemy AI can like hit you behind corners and under cover. And like in any situation, you're always going to take a couple of hits. And all of that is on top of all this other bullshit they piled on there, like the lazy jokes and the racism and the homophobia and all that other stuff, and which all that stuff is wretched too. It would not have been okay even if the combat was good. But I don't see anything. I didn't find really anything redeeming about this game that I would have recommended for this. I do not recommend this game. And it's like, again, going back to the thing I said before, it's like they cribbed so much from Grand Theft Auto 3. It's not like there weren't good shooters out there at the time. I mean, so this game comes out in 2003. In 2001, you had Max Payne, you had Serious Sam, you had Red Faction, you had Halo. They could have ripped off Halo and made this better combat. 2002, you had Medal of Honor. You had Star Wars Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, one of my favorite shooters ever, by the way. That game is damn fun. Hitman 2 came out in 2002. Unreal 2003 came out in 2002. After I got off of my trying to play this game, I downloaded and I played the first Half-Life. And Half-Life came out in 1998, and that is some solid combat, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm enjoying, I played over like 12 hours now, and I'm enjoying most of it. It's really fun. It's aged like fine wine. It's held up pretty well. And that's a game that came out 5 years before this game. Like there were so many other better shooters that they could have adapted things from, and they didn't. And like, if you're going to make the argument that at least the combat is fun, you could make fun combat. Like Jedi Outcast, like I can do a code in that game to do realistic saber combat, and I could force choke a stormtrooper, throw my lightsaber, and hack all of their limbs off them, throw them off a cliff, and that is damn fun. And that should say a lot about where my mind is regarding this game. Like there was ways that this game could have been fun, and it's like one of those things where you've got all these binary choices. One is to make the game fun, one is to make the game not fun, and they always pick the not fun option, even in the stuff where it seemed like that's where they wanted the player to go.
Fun? Not fun. Not fun.
Thus ends my extended rant about my harrowing experience, which I now projected upon the three of you, of playing this game. Phil bore the brunt of most of this because you would hear me commenting about this game.
Yeah, and I would just be like, please stop playing this game. You don't need to play the whole game in order to do this podcast.
I took your advice eventually, and I just watched a Let's Play video from World of Long Plays, and it wasn't missing much. And this guy did a pacifist run, and it looks so unfun.
Hey there, fellow netizens. This is Kevin back in the editor's chair. One more time, I think this is a good point to take a break. And 2 weeks from now, the thrilling conclusion to our remastered version of Postal 2, learning about what went on for Postal 2 and Running with Scissors in the years after its release. And so that will do it for today's episode of Scandalous Games. If you like what we're doing and want to help the show, subscribe or follow us wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a rating. If you want to learn more, check out our website, scandalousgamespodcast.wordpress.com, where I publish the show notes and the sources for every episode. Our theme music is Occam Seek Me by Seek Knowledge via the Free Music Archive. Used under a CC BY NCSA 3.0 US license. If you have a question, comment, or idea for a topic for a future episode, email us at scandalousgamespodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, I'm Kevin Impellizeri, and speaking for Phil Thomas, Elford Stephens, and Andy Hunter, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next Scandal. Subscribe to Fat Roll Gaming on YouTube, and listen to So We Were Talking About Beast Wars wherever you get your podcasts.